So, I've seen a number of videos of men and women who have conversations about the importance of the family dynamic, male and female relations, how they relate to each other, the expectations of both, and everything in between. And so, I've decided I'm basically going to voice my opinion on this because, well, I'm a guy, and I deserve to have my voice heard too. So, one of the things I've noticed is, and I'm going to go ahead and define the term first, there are what I call union feminists. What does that mean? Well, for reference, have you ever had a job where you worked somewhere where there was a union that you could join, but even if you didn't join the union, you still had to operate under the union rules in relevance to that job? I used to have that whenever I was at a car cleaner service over by the airport north of Will Rogers Airport here in Oklahoma City. The point is, even though I wasn't part of the union, I still had to follow the union rules. And trust me, I fucking hated all of it. So, now that I've made my understanding, it's like this. There are women in this world, and specifically in the West, who will essentially claim that they're not feminists, but will have the brain and mentality and actions of feminists. They'll have the idea that women deserve all kinds of equality when it comes to how they have benefits, but none of the responsibilities. Like the typical joke about the feminist. Whenever it's time for them to pay the bill, let the man do it. It's tradition for men to pay the bill on the date or the movie or the restaurant, all that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, women don't ever want to have to foot the bill. It's also the whole pro-feminist where they obsess over the private privilege, get out of jail free card of abortion so they can continue being ravenous whores and think nothing wrong with having body counts that show that they are incapable of being, rational, reasonable. And yet these are, and by the way, to quote the dapper-dressed Mr. Spoon, aristocratic utensil, the feminists have told us for years that they are more than their bodies, and then they flash their OnlyFans accounts, only proving that they really do believe that they are only their bodies. And that's just sad. Anyway, but the reason I call them union feminists, and why I want to point this out, is because I've noticed a lot of women that have an attitude that think that women are not meant to submit to men. They're supposed to be equal. No, that's not how it works. Now, I used to have that mentality for a long time because I grew up with a mom and two sisters, and it's kind of normal to have the whole, women are equal because you had a bastard dad and bastard stepdad and stuff like that. So, make sure it doesn't go out. Anyway, hitchhikers, I guess. Anyway, my point is, in the great truth of the matter, men and women are not equal, and we never will be. Equality is a made-up, man-made fantasy. That's why communism doesn't work. That's why equality doesn't work. It is a fiction, not a reality. Men are naturally stronger. Women, they're lesser. That doesn't mean we have to hate you. It doesn't mean we're dominating over you. It also means we don't just ignore you. There's a point of the Bible saying that, I can't remember the exact verse, but Jesus says unto the women, submit to your husbands, and husbands, love your wives and care for them, just as Christ cares for the church. The point is not that we're just supposed to dominate over them and be absolutists. We're supposed to be caring. We have that authority. With authority comes also the responsibility. If we are meant to have a kind of responsibility that says we're the ones that have to take care of certain things, then with that responsibility comes a sense of privilege, a sense of authority, a sense of opportunity. For example, if we're the ones that are supposed to be the responsible repairmen who fix the car, fix the house, fix problems when they show up, then by God, we're going to have the authority when it comes to what happens to the house, because if I have to be the one to constantly fix the thing, well, I'm going to make the decision to say it's not whatever keeps causing these things to break. They're not going to happen that often. So you get the idea. It's the same thing with women. Now, I'm not so based that I believe in no women voting, but I will believe that no, I don't think women in power is a good thing. At least not in politics. There are women who can be effective in bureaucracy. I mean, I've seen it personally. But point is, when it comes to politics, no. Because the reality is, no men or women take women in power seriously. And I know I can already hear all the people who are like, oh, well, we were pro-Hillary. You were pro-Hillary because y'all were so pathetic and desperate for whamming president that you didn't actually care to know anything about her. Which, by the way, since I have just transferred over into that subject, nice subtle segue, I guess. Here's a question for all of the women voters, since it might as well be asked. Why should women have the right to vote? Now, earlier I said that you have a voice, and you have one, but my question is, what is that voice towards? Because the difference between a man voting and a woman voting is a man votes for utility, the effectiveness, the ability by which something can operate and work. Women, well, you can go on YouTube and find enough videos of women who talk about the subject, and the absolute number one reoccurring theme is vanity. Women should be allowed to vote because my issues, and that's the whole point. Men vote for society. In other words, everybody, women vote for themselves. Hence earlier when I said about women's abortion protection. Because the truth is, these women just want to preserve their privilege to not have to be held accountable. Putting out the ashes. Think about what was one of the biggest subjects for the political left. The grand Indian, somehow all of a sudden black because she was voting for, she was running in the Democrat Party, Kamala Malala Ding Dong Harris. What was the most important thing for the Democrat vote at the time? The answer was protection of abortion rights. And by the way, abortion is not a right, it's a privilege. So let's just rip that Band-Aid off now. It is not a right to murder another human being just because you choose not to say it's not a human being. And by the way, yes, I can. I already made the video about Elon Musk, but in reality, if you're going to say who the real Nazis are, then you have to realize that people in the past who said, we're going to kill this thing because it's not human, and we don't call it human, and also the, slave owners back in the day, and said that blacks aren't people, they're property. Hey, guess who else you sound like? Anyway. The point is, the reason why I can understand when people sit there and do the whole why shouldn't women vote is because they point out that women only ever care about the vanity. They don't care about the utility. Why was Hillary Clinton so important to be president? Because she was whamming. Why was it important for Kamala Malala Ding Dong Harris to be president? Well, in the post-Trump victory meltdown videos, I've seen a number of these leftists say, well, she was the most qualified. She couldn't be any more qualified. And I ask you, okay, what makes her qualified outside of being left-leaning and having the vagina? Don't worry, I'll wait. Because the truth is, she slept her way to the top. She literally fucked a guy for power. She constantly slept. She's literally a whore. She was a whore. She slept her way to the top, constantly gaining more and more power, and it's the reason why she would laugh every time someone asked her a serious question, because she can't fucking answer them. She wasn't a real person. She was a slut. And all the same people who were constantly regurgitating the same statement of, oh, but she's qualified. You don't understand, she's qualified. No, she wasn't. She was not qualified. She was a whore. And if she would have won presidency, and by the grace of God, it didn't happen. And by the way, if you were following those betting websites as hard as I was, there were definitely more people who agreed that Trump would win and not her. Anyway, that being said, let's say she did win. What was the message of her victory? And I don't mean anything that she could say. What does her victory represent? The answer? That being a whore who sleeps her way to the top is a career path for women. That this era of human existence, where at one point all the same people who scream and bitch about the satanic panic back in the 80s and 90s were 100% fucking validated. Because we now have one group of people who are turning themselves into whores online, and another group of people, the gamers that are lovers of the trop slop, obsessing over wanting to preserve their sexy girls in video games, whether or not the game is any good. All because, well, it's not DEI. It's not an argument. So anyway, that's really all I can think of, because, well, this is just all I can think of. The truth is, for all the women who talk about the empowerment that has come their way, I have a question for you. And I'm stopping my car for this reason. Are you happy? No, genuinely, are you happy? Because something tells me you're not. Why would I believe that? Because despite being given the world that your feminista sisters and bad touch aunties all said that you would love, that it would be the greatest thing for women, you're now the most depressed and suicidal in history. When women were literally thought of as property to men, to be waged war over like Helen of Troy, y'all were happier. When y'all were second-class citizens to men, to be able to be taken care of in the way I've described earlier, where men were responsible and had the authority and women were taken care of, y'all were happier. When you lived on the farm and had a number of kids, you were happier. Before you had an opportunity to vote, you were happier. And yeah, there are women that were suffragettes. Sometimes we should ask, why did they believe what they believed, and find out what their predictions were. I mean, those predictions were 100 years ago. I wonder if the world that they claimed would happen came true. And now you're thinking, what do you mean we were happier back then? Easy. Because women nowadays are on the most amount of antidepressants in human history. Women are on the most amount of antidepressants and suicidal claims ever. I have one last thought to say about this. You call us oppressive when we tell you no. But let me ask you, what if the reason why men tried to keep power out of your hands was not because we were afraid of what you would do with power, but rather afraid for you and how power would affect you, making you, well, just as sorrowful and depressed as we have been since, let's be real, responsibility is still on us, even when you refuse to accept our authority. So, this has been Alec the Okie. God bless. Good journey, and go with Jesus. You can't go wrong.